Hi, this is Victoria Meyer. Welcome back to the Chemical Show. This week, I am speaking with Keith Wiggins, who is the CEO of Econic Technologies, a deep tech company focused on catalyst technology for renewable carbon. It's a lot of words, but we're going to get to that. Keith is an accomplished senior leader. He joined Econic in 2021, really to help commercialize and take the company to the next level. He brings over 35 years of experience in material science companies, including ICI, Dow, as well as several startups. And Keith is really an advocate for advanced manufacturing and sustainability and actively supports the chemical industry's sustainable transformation. And we're going to hear a lot about that today. So Keith, welcome to the Chemical Show.
Victoria, thanks for the opportunity. Delighted to be here.
Great to have you here. Keith, what's your origin story? What got you interested in chemicals in the first place, and what eventually led you to Econic?
Okay, how far back do you want to go? I guess it all comes back from a love of chemistry. I mean, the science is fantastic in terms of what it does and what it can achieve. And if I think back as a kid, it was always interesting, chemistry. I used to do experiments as a kid. And that took me to university. I studied chemistry. You also learn a little bit about yourself in that growing up period. And I needed to know chemistry enough that I needed to be able to look things up, not necessarily the deep stuff. Anyway, I joined ICI as a chemist. I got really bored about being in the lab and wearing the lab coat and doing the repetition. And so I moved to a TS&D role, got far more energy in seeing how the chemistry was applied, working with customers. But it was at a time when there were glass ceilings and glass walls within the ICI organization. I wanted to get into commercial, into sales. And effectively, that wasn't an option for me in ICI.
And because you were a chemist by training, so it wasn't, you couldn't get
commercial? If you're hired as a chemist, you stay as a chemist. That's the track you're on. It's fairly rigid, back in the day. But what was interesting was this disruptor, this game changer was coming into Europe at the time, which was Dow Chemical. And it was a really exciting time. I looked around and Dow or American companies in general were by far and away the most commercially advanced in their thinking at that particular time. So I joined Dow and stayed there for 24 years, which were fantastic. Or rather, probably 22 years were fantastic.
Yeah, there's always a less fantastic.
There's always a transition period. But commercial roles, always in specialty chemicals, progressively bigger roles, given fantastic opportunity at a really young age. The opportunity to live internationally, so spells in Germany and Switzerland and the US, running global businesses and moving up there through the ladder, which was fantastic. It was at a time when Dow were doing major acquisitions, so Union Carbide and Roman Harks. And just to go through those experiences and many, many others, just, fantastic, priceless experience. So I came out in 2013 and my kids, we needed to stay in the UK because of the kids' education and needed to look around. And the Dow diamond was still firmly imprinted in my head. So I couldn't really, on my forehead, so I couldn't compete so well to get into another corporate. I didn't really want to because I thought that, Dow was probably the best at what it did at that time. And so I looked around and private equity was in its ascendancy at that time. So I set up a consulting company, did a lot of PE work from a consulting perspective. And I just loved the fact of the money that was available or that could come from that. But the work wasn't really that exciting. And neither were the people, to be quite honest. But what was exciting was the stuff which was coming out of UK universities, which is very, very strong. So lots and lots of really cool innovation and lots of innovation companies which were selling materials into the company, into the industry. And I had a lot to offer based on my Dow experience. So I consulted for many really varied companies, which was an amazing experience in terms of getting into this environment, which was so different from Dow. And then different in some ways, similar in most. And then got exec positions with first of all in Anoco, then with One Again. And right at the early stage, I got to understand or know Econic. And I'd made the connection in those early days with Dow, the polyurethane business, but it was very early. But it was from Imperial College, which is my alma mater, and managed to keep in touch. Anyway, 10 years later, after Econic was born, then their transition, they approached me and didn't have any hesitation with regard to taking on this new opportunity. So
That's awesome.
so that's my history in a nutshell.
That's good. That's a great history. And I think it's interesting that you felt that you hit some glass ceilings, because I think we often consider that to be, we have a lot of conversation these days about glass ceilings in terms of women and people of color and other categorizations. But the reality is there's a lot of glass ceilings in different areas that we don't always recognize.
Yeah. And they vary in different geographies. So, but
Yeah.
the US is very much a meritocracy, and hopefully, and it will stay that way. That's what's made America great, and it will stay that way.
We hope so. We hope so. All right, Keith, so tell us a little bit about Econic Technologies.
All right. Econic it's a fabulous opportunity to be with Econic. Is absolutely at the forefront of the move of manufacturing towards renewable carbon. And effectively, if you take the premise that the world is continuing to grow and require the products that the chemical industry make, most of which are carbon-based, and there's enough carbon above the ground now to sustain that growth. So if you consider recycling, if you consider bio-based, and if you consider CO2, then effectively all of that carbon can be repurposed rather than being treated as waste to make the essential products that enhance our lives every day. So, CO2 is classified as a waste today, and Econic has a fabulous catalyst-based technology which converts that CO2 into a useful raw material. And that's effectively our mission, is to start the business primarily in the polyurethanes industry, secondarily in the surfactants industry, to make CO2 a co-monomer with existing feedstocks. So it's some 20 years R&D, and so if you include the research that went on in the universities, 10 years is R&D for Econic as a company. In the last 2 years, with a fundraise which closed in 2022, is all been about commercialization, and that's effectively my task, is the transitioning of the company from an R&D base to a real thriving, growing commercial enterprise. And I have to say, we're having fun and we're making it happen at the moment.
That's awesome. I know we're going to talk a little bit later about how you're doing some of that. So Keith, you've led businesses in some of the biggest chemical companies, right? I've seen Dow, and then you've gone to tiny, by comparison, startups. What stands out to you as the biggest difference or the biggest opportunity when you compare the two?
Yeah, great question. Starting off with similarities. I mean, the fundamentals are the same, absolutely the same. I mean, we're here to make money, and we're here to make money for our investors, and our investors are venture capitalists, and they have a set criteria which they require to get return on their investment. So the same principles apply when it comes to essentials like safety, respect for people, the same responsibility around supply chains. So the fundamentals are the same. I think learning from a Dow experience is that when you're in a company like Dow, you get to learn what good looks like. I mean, they have processes and the experience to be able to really define what good looks like. And that sets the competitive standard in the marketplace. And so what you bring as an industry professional that's been through the the process and the developments with a company like Dow is that experience to apply as this new organization is starting to grow. But the other fundamentals are understanding customers, because customers buy based on the same criteria whether you're Dow or Econic. The same criteria applies with regard to geographic differences in terms of what drives markets. And policy is so important in Europe. Competitiveness is so important with regard to the US and the evolving markets in China. So there's a level of being able to take this experience and apply it with a blank canvas, and that's really, really exciting.
Yeah.
So
I think that's interesting too, because you're right. You get to take these learnings, and the fundamentals of business are the fundamentals of business across companies, across industries, et cetera. But you get to also maybe break some of the bad habits that exist, right? Because we all know that every company has bad habits that are just like allowed to continue to persist. So I guess you get to leave a few things behind and take some things forward.
Well, big companies have great processes and great people, but it's running processes which are fabulously well developed in big companies, and you get to learn that, and necessarily so. I mean, just the size of the organization and the spread and the breadth. The smaller companies, you have to rely on great people, and you have to build in appropriate processes when you need it. Now, where it goes bad in big companies is when the process becomes the self-fulfilling prophecy. Is you take your eye off of the customer and what the customer wants. You take your eye off the technology, and you're just fulfilling that process. So we're a delicate balance here, is that we need to apply processes, but we need to apply them appropriately to get the job done. The big difference, and the biggest difference, is speed and impact. I mean, without any shadow of a doubt, because early stage companies, VC funded companies, they're not for the faint hearted. I mean, we are spending our investors' cash. And as long as we're not delivering what we say we're going to deliver, then that spend, effectively, the money doesn't go on forever. So we have to implement. We don't have time to analyze and perfect the situation. We have to get out there and sell it when it's good enough, and then work with partners to build it up into something which is a commercial proposition. Now, the other part of it is, and I mean, similar background, how it is. You do great work within a big company as part of a fantastic team, and it comes out with a great result. And you feel there's a certain fulfillment about being that cog as part of the wheel.
Yeah.
When you are in an early stage company, the impact is amazing. So when you do get a deal over the line, when the molecule comes out on spec, when you do scale up and the plant runs, then the impact is fantastic. So from a personal fulfillment perspective, I recommend it to anyone. But as I say, it's like all things in life, there's ups and downs. So you've got to be quite resilient at the same time.
Yeah. And I think in a startup, there's no place to hide.
No.
Right. I think, as we know, in every big corporation, you can hide sometimes, whether it's by day or whether it's by year, whatever. But when you're in a startup, there is no hiding. Everything you do is visible and impactful, positively and negatively.
Completely. Yeah, completely. So, I mean, that's the way it is. But you got to believe in the technology, you got to believe in the opportunity, and you got to make the team believe in that to be able to move forward. And that's quite visceral. That's quite a nice environment to be in. If that's what floats your boat, which it does for me. Anyway.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So your focus at Econic is commercialization of the technology and really helping bring Econic to a commercial enterprise, starting with polyurethane, and I know you're also looking into surfactants. What are the critical elements or steps for Econic in achieving that commercialization? What's the path that you're taking, and how will you know that you're there?
Great question. You remember back in the day when we were going through marketing school and the ANSOF matrix? I mean, what we're doing at Econic is we're creating a market. We're creating the demand for something that doesn't currently exist today in industrial quantities. So we've got to understand the whole value chain, and we've got to understand the drivers of the market going forward. And coming back to this whole area of renewable carbon, if you look forward to consumers and Generation X coming through, the world's making great inroads with regard to sustainability. But once the emissions part and the energy part is sorted, then you're going to be looking at are the constitute materials that make what we use every day, and it's all carbon based, and that needs to be well taken care of. And this whole renewable carbon. Now, the chemical industry, as much as I love it and as much as I've been brought up with it, I recognize that it's conservative in nature. It's highly regulated. The pressure on cost, the pressure on efficiency, the innovation is not what it used to be. So for us to be able to create a market for our product, we've got to go down the value chain, and we have to sell concept with the supporting data, which are credible to the drivers, the channel captains in the specific value chains that we want to sell into.
So when you talk about doing that, Keith, and going down the value chain, you're talking about getting all the way down to consumer products companies, for instance, right? The people that are the final users of the material. Is that correct?
Yep, that's absolutely right. So these technologies, and certainly at the early stage, they're never perfect. If you had a drop in fits with existing facility, requires no capex, and so then it would be. But there's always some adjustment that's needed when you're looking at it from a manufacturing perspective. And you can go crazy as an early stage company saying you really need to buy my technology because this is what it's going to do to you or do for your business as a producer. But if you're running a big, highly efficient operation, it's very difficult to be able to make that change without the pull coming through from the marketplace. So if you're going to the end product and you look at those markets are consolidated amongst the big brands, then they've got tremendous buying power. But they're also under an immense amount of pressure when it comes to their ESG reporting. So if you can capture, let's say, a more sustainable, higher performing, equal or lower cost product, and then work with them to leverage it through their supply chain. And what we're seeing is that that's coming through in spades with regard to consumer goods companies, and automotive companies, and so on and so forth. So the train has left the station and is gathering speed. But for an early stage company, we haven't got so much resource, so we need collaboration, we need focus, and we need to be able to articulate the benefits and the impact of what we can bring. And then when they introduce us to their supply chain, then we've got to work collaboratively with the supply chain in order to be able to get that done.
Yeah. And I know from our prior conversations, Keith, that there's a couple of darlings in the industry that have done this, right? So Tech is a great example. And in fact, I spoke with Jennifer Holmgren, their CEO, last year, I think sometime. I'll link it in the show notes so people can find that episode. But they are noted, number one, also a 20-year journey, right? So there is no quick wins and overnight successes, right? Overnight success comes after 20 years. But they certainly have done very well at partnering with, I think they did some work with Zara. They've done some work with others. I've spoken with Avantium and their CEO, and they've similarly done things in the PET space or PET replacement space with Carlsberg Beer and others. So figuring out how you get to that end is certainly critical. So Keith,
those two companies are real.
They're real.
They're at the leading edge. They're fantastic. I've never met Jennifer Holden, but I am a huge admirer of what she does, and clearly the Avantium is really at that forefront with regards to the polyester supply chain. So we're riding on their tails.
Yeah, and hey, you know what? It's good to have a coattail to ride on and a great example across the chemical industry of a path that is a successful path to follow. So,
Yeah.
so you guys are partnering though with some companies in different regions to support your efforts, right? So
Yeah.
Manali Petrochemical in India, Chenwan in China, and then most recently Monument Chemical in the U.S.
hmm
And obviously, so I guess maybe a couple questions. Number one, what's the role that these partnerships play for you? We'll start with that, and then I'll follow up with another question later.
Well, they are the brave souls that are we call them pioneer licensees, and so they require all of the first mover advantage, that they take on the responsibility and the risk of going first. Because this isn't for the faint-hearted. And getting stuff into the marketplace has got to work. It's got to be cost competitive, and there has to be supply chains in place. So these folks are very brave, and our, let's say, primary focus is to make them as successful as we possibly can. We want them to have fabulous businesses where they are just completely in the lead in this sector with regard to this technology.
Yeah.
And our focus is working with them, and it is working really well. I mean, Changhua are building and this is all in the public domain, but are building a 20,000 ton facility in Zhangjiagang in China. And we're working with them with a European engineering company for the plant design. So that's moving ahead. Manali and Monument are both retrofitting their existing facilities, which is a fantastic thing about the Econic technology, is that it works in existing assets. So with a relatively low capex retrofit, you can get all the benefits of being able to use CO2 as a co-monomer in your production. So both Monument and Manali are going through those retrofit exercises now. So we're at the stage now where we are desperate to get industrial quantities of the type they can provide into the marketplace.
So they're effectively taking the technology and the catalyst and creating the polyurethane from it to then go sell into the market. So they're one step away from the end of the value chain, I guess, or somewhere in the middle, perhaps.
Yeah. Well, so what we do is, I mean, we're not going to be a polyol provider. So our business model is to license our technology and then sell catalysts. And so from that perspective, what we do is after the deal is done, we tech transfer our technology under license, and we've got a fabulous patent portfolio which supports that license. And then we work to transfer customers, which we've taken to a level which is a level of our capability. We've got a pilot plant in Runcorn near Liverpool, which makes pilot quantities, but we are way oversold. So we're working now against the clock to get those larger quantities in place in order that the customers' developments and qualifications can go ahead.
Yeah. Got it. So you've got some product in the market being played with, so to speak, and your partners are going to help get some actual commercial quantities that can start being.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you know how the qualification goes. You know, we're beyond. They want to scale up their trials, and we've got a portfolio which is, as I say, burgeoning. But we can't do the engineering work quickly enough. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Well, it's good to have demand.
Yeah, tremendous.
So what do you find critical? I think partnerships are absolutely key in developing and scaling technology, especially we're seeing this all over in green chemistry and sustainable chemistries, that partnering is the way to go because nobody has each piece of the equation, right? And so you need that. What do you find is to be kind of the key enablers of an effective partnership so that you're both getting what you want out of it?
Yeah. Well, I think it's alignment. It starts at the top, and it's alignment of the business objectives. So, by building a relationship where we understand what our customers want, then we need to focus on delivering that as a company. So there is, the physical tech transfer of the technology when it comes to the recipes and the manufacturing of different polyols containing different quantities of CO2. And you know this market, I mean, it's a specialty chemical market. There are hundreds of variants of polyol which are out there. So we also work with them with regard to formulation of different end systems to be able to help them accelerate their path to market. And then from an engineering perspective, we also work with them with regard to the retrofit on their existing facilities with all of the safety and the quality requirements that needs. So it's a multi-relationship setup or project plans that we have to put in place, but it starts with that alignment around, how can we make you successful? Now, for a business like ours, we're making the transition. It's the R&D guys that got us here. There's a very different way of working between doing R&D to doing what a customer wants. And so we really need to be acutely focused on their business and what they require to be able to get to market. And that's a transition that we're going through. But what's also interesting is, the different growth phases is that the demand is already starting to multiply. This is quite exponential in terms of the movement going forward. And I think the challenge will be for us is putting the supply chain behind it with regard to getting catalysts manufactured and recycled at the appropriate points around the world. So there's an awful lot to be done here, but with that relationship and that alignment of objectives, then we can focus on making it happen.
Yeah, Keith, so I know that there have been some new polyurethane technologies that utilize CO2 in the past that in some cases they've shut down. So people have had experience at times with a similar technology that wasn't successsul for them. You're obviously on this path to be successful, and I know of some of the inner workings of Econic, so I can so I know some of the detail. But how do you overcome that? Well, we've seen it before, not from you, but we've seen it before. How do you overcome that resistance? Because, again, your customers, whether they be chemical companies or whether they be the end users, have to make a prioritized decision about what they're working on, right? They can't work on every new technology, new idea. So how do you overcome some of those objections?
Yes, great question. Yeah, I think we've got the best technology, but we can't claim the invention of the concept or the ideation of the concept of getting CO2 repurposed in polymers. But the other technologies are quite different from ours. So if you look at the technologies which are out there, they fall into three distinct brackets. And actually, the molecules are quite different as well in terms of where the CO2 is in the backbone of the polymer. So there were unstable issues in the past, which led to a perception in the market that these products were unstable. There's also the aspect of cost and scale-up cost. Is that if you look at another technology which is out there, requires very, very high pressures and very high temperatures, which means that your capex cost goes through the roof. And plus the chemical reactions at high pressures and high temperatures require different ways of manufacturing. So scalability or affordable scalability is a key thing. Now, for us, we've needed to be able to present data. Well, first of all, you sell the concept and you sell the performance of the molecule and the added benefit in a system into the value chain to a producer it's the key criteria are cost to produce and feasibility of production and the benefits that go with that. So it's not a trivial exercise at all, and you have to have material that people can test and work with. There's no point in going in and pleading, well, we're different. It was different last time, but this is what we can do. They actually want to see it. So they want to see foams, they want to test the polyols, they want to put it through their systems in order to be able to prove it out. And it's a similar situation with regard to the engineering aspect. It is to bring partners in that bring the credibility and the affirmation that you need. So the engineering provider that we're working with did full due diligence on our process before they would take on the PDP work because of their own reputation. So all of that is positive reaffirmation of what we do. But it's much easier to say than it is to do because of all of the various different aspects of what our business requires. So you can add in regulatory approvals, you can add in product registration, you can add in life cycle assessments and the impact on overall environmental footprint. So all of this adds to the complexity of our industry, but also what holds our industry together and makes it strong. Yeah. So I don't know, it's a bit of a rambling answer, so forgive me, Victoria, but yeah, we can't just go in and say we're better, buy our products, and they sign a check. It doesn't work that way. But
Yeah. Some of it's in the proof is in the pudding, and it's in who you partner with. And I think even your point about the due diligence that your engineering partners do, because their reputation is also on the line, is really notable. Yeah. So Keith, on a broader level, you and Econic are pretty active in the renewable carbon initiative and the sustainability working group of EcoPure, the European Association of Flexible Polyurethane Foam. So that's a long name. And you're in the renewable space. So you clearly see the opportunity, right? You see this as the next step. What is the opportunity, though, for the rest of the chemical industry? What is, as it relates to renewable feedstocks and circularity, why do we need to be getting on this bandwagon, so to speak, and taking the next steps towards renewable?
Yeah. Well, I mean, in terms of the drivers behind it, it's obviously, the global warming and the drive towards more sustainable technologies. As I mentioned earlier, emissions and energy comes first. The carbon footprint of manufacturing will follow. And I think that's pretty well understood. And then if you look at the growth trajectories in the world, there's finite resources which are coming through from existing fossil fuels. And where there are fossil fuels, they're coming from more difficult areas to extract, which puts their cost up. And then there's the political aspect of all of this. You see what's happening in Russia, Ukraine, and different parts of the world. Then different continents have different challenges in that regard. So, but looking at the overall consumption, then the consumption is got to be fueled or got to be fed from a raw material base, which is reliable and sustainable. And that's where renewable carbon comes in. So there's some fantastic technologies which are coming through, and we're proud to be part of that. And if you take it in terms of the mass balance, you can gasify, pyrolyze technology based on cheap, sustainable energy now to make feedstocks through existing crackers. And then you've got this mass balance approach. And I don't know the LCA on that, or the carbon footprint on that, but all of the indications are from the companies that are driving this, that it's going to happen. And then you've got the circular economy in terms of collecting supply, aggregating existing supply chains and repurposing the existing materials. And then you've got the bio-based, and so you're competing with crops and food sources, but you also got that whole element of fermentation routes to different chemistries. And then, of course, you've got CO2. And there's 36 billion tons of CO2 emitted every year. And if
Oh,
you look
wow.
at, it's massive, and that's every year. So then you look at the carbon capture technology, which is going into place to collect that CO2, and whether that's from emissions or from air capture or various other sources, then effectively once you've got it, you've got to do something with it. So you can stick it back down underground in the old oil wells up to a point, but all of that is a cost.
Mm.
So the capture is a cost, the storage is a cost. So why not take that abundant CO2 and turn it into a valuable raw material? And that's the key thing here is we're taking a waste carbon to valuable carbon. We're repurposing that carbon to put it to good use. And the momentum of this, and this is why I believe that we're on the leading edge, on a macro basis, specifically with polyurethanes and then with surfactants, that our technology goes into other polymer systems, but our investors want us to get to market and show a return on what we do. But if you then look at and the reason for that is the opportunity within polyurethane is probably 3-5 years behind the circular systems that are being put in place for the big global thermoplastics. PLA is another area which, will
Yeah.
it work? Won't it work? Doesn't fit with existing recycling systems. Is starting to find the niches where it adds benefit. So as all of these technologies converge, there will be winners that come through, and whether or not that's driven purely by commercial routes or whether it's driven by policy. And that's the reason why we're involved in the RCI and with Europor is specifically in Europe. Europe is far more driven by policy.
Mm.
Having said that, look at what Biden is doing with the IRAs in North America. There's a capitalist principle that's coming behind that policy to do things based on future technologies. And there's a couple of states that have actually petitioned on CCU technologies. So it's starting. The Chinese see the opportunity because
Yeah.
CO2. A
Yeah, let's
lot
talk about
cheaper.
China a little bit because I know that when we were talking earlier, you mentioned that you really see China just kind of accelerating ahead in renewable technologies, carbon neutral technologies, et cetera. Can you just elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I can. Can I? Yeah, on a personal basis, my first trip into mainland China was in 1989. And I think I've been incredibly privileged in terms of the time when I was born to see China and its ascendancy. And if you look at the last 20 years, its growth has really supported the world economies. I mean, but in those early days when it was moving into manufacture, it was always second generation technologies and everybody was scared of IP integrity and the like. Now I see China in a different mode. I see them leapfrogging existing technologies to go to future technologies based on growing their manufacturing base going forward. So, I mean, it is happening. They are confident. They've got very good people. They've got global supply chains that have all been put in place, and they're fully motivated to make this happen. So every time I come back from China, I come back exhilarated and a little bit scared that I'm not Chinese, really. But but they are a force absolutely to be reckoned with.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. And I think, as as you alluded to some of the policy drivers that Europe is putting in place in North America, China kind of has always had that, right? And so I think there's less, it's not really a capitalistic, if you will, society as
It's
much
not.
as government driven strategically. And so I think that's part of it as well.
The meetings are very different. I mean, no one argues in it or has a counter view in a Chinese meeting. It's this is what we will do because that's what has come from above.
Yeah.
So, in an autocratic society, you can get things done very, very quickly.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that their policies and their safety and their attention to the environment is any different to anywhere else in the world. I mean, their standards are high, but they get things done because they make a decision and they move ahead with it. It's a far simpler environment to grow
Yeah, interesting.
than the
Uh,
West.
yeah, it's different. It's we could elaborate for a long time on that.
Yeah, I
Anyway,
don't mean to get geopolitical, so forgive me.
we
Econic's far more in my
uh,
sphere of influence.
absolutely. So, Keith, what's next for you in Econic? When should we be looking for in terms of the next 6 to 12 months, and when are we going to start seeing Econic products or Econic technology-based products out in the market?
I think you see we're test marketing in different parts of the world now, and those developments are going very well. So I don't think it's long until you see products in the market. It's going to be up to our customers how much they tell their story and shout about it, and we'll be doing everything to be able to sing this from the rooftops. So I don't think that will be long. Our first task is to get these plants built and get product in the market in commercial quantities, and
The
that will be
timeline on that.
and that will be in the next 12 to 18 months, and
Awesome.
where there will be marked difference.
Yeah.
And you'll see we'll have a European supplier on board as well at that time. So these are our pioneer investors. These are the people that are going first. And what comes after them, then we'll see. Because our business model is to license our technology and to sell our catalysts. So we're taking it one step at a time. And the first stage is really keep focusing on making our existing pioneer licensees, our pioneer customers, as successful as they can be. And then our belief is that the success breeds success, and we'll work on some options from that point.
Awesome. Great. Well, Keith, thank you for taking your time today to join us today on the Chemical Show. It's been great to have a conversation with you.
Fantastic to be here, Victoria, and thank you once again for the opportunity. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. And thanks everyone for joining us today. Keep listening, keep following, keep sharing, and we will talk again soon.